All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the next episode on the Gathering of the Miami Valleys podcast here. As you can see, we've got a rock star lineup of heavy hitters out here today. We're going to be praising the Lord. We're going to be sharing our experience. We're going to be hopefully trying to connect other men that don't know us, aren't familiar with the Gathering. Hopefully, we're going to reach these men and connect them to something that could change their life. So, Brian, can you tell us a little bit about, from your experience, what is a locker room? For somebody who sees how a locker room can change your life, what is a locker room?
Yeah. So my name's Brian Heck. I've been involved now very heavily in the Gathering over the last couple years. And locker room is an opportunity to connect with other men, men that have the same struggles or have faced the same struggles, the same challenges that we have in life. And oftentimes, our society pushes us to be more individualistic and not around fellowship and community. And so oftentimes we try to go through life alone. Yeah. And specifically as men, we are seen as, we have to be the rock sometime. Yep. And so you take that as bear everything on your own shoulders. Yeah. And that's not what life is meant to be. What it's about, that's not what Christ intended for us to do.
Absolutely not.
Christ intended us to fellowship and connect with other Christians, and specifically, I think, through the Gathering and locker rooms itself, it provides that opportunity to be able to connect with other individuals, other men that
get plugged
experience
in.
The same life circumstances, and plug in with them through both fellowship and laughter and joy, but then also getting down to the nitty gritty and the seriousness of life.
Absolutely.
And helping each other out. So
good deal. So I'm going to say it's probably safe to assume everybody knows Mr. Pinkleton down there on the end. Yes, and I would imagine most everybody knows Jeremy as well. Jeremy, can you give us an overview who you are, what you do, and what's your connection to a locker room?
Absolutely. So my name is Jeremy Hudson. In my day job, I spend a lot of time at Fellowship Church here in Springfield, either at our Upper Valley or I'm the campus pastor at our Spring Hill campus on North Limestone. Okay. Before that, I was the youth pastor at Fellowship, so I've been there about 15 years. And that was kind of my observation, either both with youth and also in kind of a ministry setting, was the reason why getting involved with locker rooms was a big deal for me. Because I saw, kind of like what Brian was saying, I saw the effects of some of that isolationism. So I'd have guys that would come to my office kind of at their wits' end and like, my life's a mess. I've made choices that I don't know how I got here. Yep. I've cashed in on some things that I said I was never going to let be a part of my life, or I'm just lost. Like I don't even know what I'm doing here. There's like a void of purpose. Yep. But I also remember seeing the effects of that with their kids. With teenagers. So, teenagers are watching dads go through crisis or just that breakdown of walking in that kind of a purpose. And a big part of it was just isolation. Mm-hmm. And so when I would ask like guys that I'm mentoring, younger guys and teenagers, hey, who does your dad spend time with? They're like, nobody. Right. Dad goes to work and comes home. And then when they would describe a relationship, a lot of times you could see the void of that. And so for me, that was always, as soon as Jeff started talking about the Gathering as a ministry and then the focus on locker rooms, to me, that wasn't a something we can do. That's something we have to do.
Yep. So last week, Jeff talked a little bit about like the original locker room groups. And how many years ago has that been, Jeff?
We've been around for 13.
13. So Jeremy, how long have you been connected to the Gathering?
We figured this out the other day. How long has it been? Has it been 6, 7 years?
However long Bill Brown's been gone, 5 or 6.
5 or 6. So I was a part of another kind of quasi locker room of pastors that were getting together and kind of having that same, because, even though your job is being around people, it can still be kind of an isolating gig. Yeah. And then Bill Brown, Dr. Brown, who was the president of Cedarville, was leading the locker room. And then once his transition happened and he ended up leaving the area, Jeff came and asked if I would get involved and lead this group.
Small shoes to fill.
Yeah, I'm like, you're asking me to fill Dr. Brown's shoes. That's right. So I don't know if I was just bored or...
We had complete confidence in you.
something. So I stepped into that group and have been there ever since.
So when your first experience with the locker room, did you go into it with the mentality of, I'm going to try to lead this and I'm going to try to rally up other people? Or were you going into it with the mindset of like, I need other men around me? Because I think that a lot of times, I'll meet somebody like you and I'll think, man, he must really have it going on. Like he must really have this all figured out. And like, he doesn't struggle with things.
We just have good PR people.
Yeah. But so when you go into the locker room or you hear about it and you're getting connected to it the first time, are you going into it with the thought of, I need men, or are you going into it with, I'm trying to pour into other men?
That's a great question. And, the thought hit me. That actually wasn't my first locker room experience. Many years ago, Chad Wilson started a locker room as his brother Andy had just stepped into the role of prosecutor. And he wanted to get a group of guys that would kind of walk that transition out with Andy. And that went on for, I think, maybe a year and a half. And then, people went different ways and stuff. But the real reason why I got involved in the locker room type of environment, and what I kind of brought into those experiences is I have a little bit of a unique situation going back to my time at Cedarville, where I was a part of a group. We're called Theta Rho Epsilon, or OPI in the Greek letters. And it's going on about almost 30 years of existence of some guys in school at the time that recognized this very thing. Like, we don't want to do this alone. And so they kind of built this organization, this fraternity that stays small. It's about 25 current students at a time, and they just are intentional about doing life together. And so I kind of gotten exposed to that kind of dynamic at Cedarville, and then I come out of Cedarville and I'm looking around and realizing that's an anomaly in our culture. And so when Jeff started talking to me about what locker rooms could do, I went back to that category. And I said, absolutely. Like, this has to happen, because not everybody
experienced
gets that.
it.
I'd experienced it.
Well, what's cool about that, from where I sit, Jeremy leads our group, and he's one of the best leaders we have. And, I know he's talked numerous times about, like, Nate, his son, has experienced a lot of benefit from that group tied back to Cedarville. When they go on their retreats to Chicago, or they meet, at a state park or whatever, I kind of look forward to seeing those pictures, because I don't know these guys, but I've heard Jeremy talk about it so much. A couple times Nate's been with us, like, right afterwards, and you can see his energy and excitement. So I'm like, I don't know. I know a few of the guys, but I'm like, okay, I want to know who these guys are, because they've clearly had a big impact. And Jeremy can take what he had in college and bring some of that culture to what we have in a locker room.
So let me ask you this. So you guys you've experienced the locker room, right? So once you experience it, you're like, yeah, like, this is it. I want to get plugged in. Jeff, being the director of the gathering, is there a rule on how many locker rooms you can be a part of?
It depends on who you ask.
If so,
Chuck Hall,
setting the bar. And
he's been in several. We got Nick Christian is in two groups. He leads one. He's in another. Actually, kind of leads that one on some level too. But Gary Falkenbach leads one, sits on another. Of course, I'm in a lot since I'm the executive director, and I tell people it's like I keep trying to back out of some, but they're so good. I mean, we have the newest group. And that group's unbelievable. I was thinking about some stuff Brian and Jeremy both said about friendships. We had a guy just shared the other day. He's 40 years old. He first started feeling like he had real relationships 5 years ago. Wow. And now he's dove deep into this group and shared his story in a big time way. And
he's plugged in.
Yeah, I mean, he really talked about what not having those relationships happened in his life and where it caused a lot of problems versus now, over the last 5 years, he mentioned two guys particularly, and then now our group that's really helping him out. But I think that's any guy. I mean, every time we talk, guys will say time and time again, what's been their reason for success? Community. What's been their reason for failure or not getting to where they want to be? Isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
So you experience it, you feel it. So as city manager, I would assume that you're probably busy pretty much most of the time, Brian.
Yeah. My schedule's
stays pretty busy?
Packed on a pretty daily basis.
So take me back to the time where you first were introduced to the locker rooms, and you're like, you got somebody like Jeff or Jeremy or somebody who you look up to and like, man, you got to get plugged into a locker room. I know for me, I instantly went to, gosh, more things, more stuff, more time. Like, how do you, specifically when you first got started, how did you feel about the time commitment, the commitment stepping up and meeting with men? Like, how did you initially feel when you first were introduced to a locker room?
Yeah, certainly. So, I actually had a pretty unique experience to start. So I probably connected with the gathering over 6 years ago.
Nice.
And it wasn't a great first experience. And part of it, was coming into it, I had my own questions of time because very deliberate and intentional with my schedule and my time, and started attending, and some of the people would show up late, and it just felt like there wasn't a commitment there, and so that was a struggle, and then secondly, and Jeff and I've talked through this story numerous times that. Then it got moved. I was one of the ones attending pretty regularly, and then it got moved to a time that I wasn't able to actually attend. It didn't work in my schedule, and so
it was while I was on sabbatical. Let's just make note of that.
Yeah.
So in that time, right, where you got plugged in, you obviously had built a connection. You had finally saw the value in the locker room to your attending regularly, and now all of a sudden, hey guys, we're meeting at a different time, a different location.
Yep. And so that actually kind of ended my time because I actually grew a little frustrated about it. Probably more so that was on me than the group itself. But still, it was kind of like, well, I made the commitment of this time, and then look how it worked out. But I think God always has, He puts people in the right place at the right time, and He brings things to you at the right place and right time because remember, it's His plan, not our plan.
Right. Absolutely.
And so in 2017, I was actually facing one of my most difficult challenges, challenging times in my life. And, the locker room concept got put back in there into my world. And
so was it because somebody knew you were going through a dark time? Did somebody know you were in a bad place and kind of suggest, hey, Brian, why don't you get plugged back in? Or was it the fact that you were in a dark place and you knew you had found some hope from a locker room? Like, how did you go from that dark place to getting plugged back in?
What kind of a perfect storm, if I remember correctly, just several things kind of hit at once?
Yeah, several things just kind of all came together at once. And specifically on that experience was Steve Leap. So shout out to Steve Leap. He didn't know at the time that I was going through what I was, because again, I was kind of addressing it or attacking it the wrong way. I was taking that isolationist approach and kind of reverting in only on myself and putting on myself mentally. And so not a lot of people knew what was going on. And but Steve had reached out and for coffee on something else, and then just at the end of it was like, hey, have you thought about jumping in a locker room group? And started talking to me about it. And it triggered right there in my mind. That's what I needed. I needed that opportunity to connect with people that maybe had shared the same experience that I had. And it actually worked out. The first meeting I went to, Scott Green and I connected more intentionally, and found out Scott had experienced something very similar to what I had, and then so you find out to share life lessons.
Everybody experiences those struggles.
Exactly, man. And so it was great. And that group, still, it's a little bit different makeup of that group, but that group for the most part still meets today. Every other Tuesday, and so it's exciting that's
good stuff,
to still be a part of it.
Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't that kind of happen in and out of some meetings after you would leave, like Leadership Clark County board meetings and stuff? Didn't some of that dialogue happen with a few guys that you guys were all kind of tied to Leadership Clark County, and Steve and maybe Jason Hill, whoever else was?
Yep, Steve Leap, Jason Hill, of course, and a lot of it was connected to us through Leadership Clark County. But then they would use that opportunity to talk about their locker room groups and the gathering, and then that's when I would say my time with the gathering grew even more, because even beyond the locker room group, I was able to plug into the Young Guns.
Is that the best ever? Doesn't Scott Green always want to make sure everybody knows
that was probably Young Guns 3
group?
Was probably the best iteration of Young Guns ever put together by Jeff Pinkleton.
5.0 is coming after you now.
Yeah,
this year.
So got to meet people like you, Eric, and connect with you.
So my experience coming in, like, I wasn't plugged into a locker room, right? I wasn't plugged into the gathering. I had some close people who I was connected to. Rob Rue was one of them, and Rob Rue connected me to a breakfast, and then connected me to Pinkleton, and then I was connected to the Young Guns. And then somewhere through the midst of all that, Jeff starts talking about locker rooms, right? And I'm like, I'm loving meeting with all these guys, and because it's finally a place where we check our titles at the door, right? We don't come in saying, hey, I'm Brian, the city manager, or I'm Eric, the person that does this, or I'm Jeff, the director. It's like, we are men, we are husbands, we're fathers, right? We're servant leaders, and we're trying to plug in. And I was like, the feeling that I would get connected to you guys, I think at the same time knowing like, wow, this is the city manager. Like, this is really cool to be close to him and getting to meet all the guys. I'm like, this is like, I was plugged in. I was hooked in. So my disconnect was like, so after Young Guns ended, I tried to get plugged into a locker room, and what I really appreciate about the gathering is that the age range and the diversity and the backgrounds. And it's like, so I'm like 30 years old at the time, 31, 32. And I'm meeting with guys who are like, triple OG spiritual warriors for real, right?
Gary Wade.
They're like 50, 60, 70, and then been doing this their whole life.
Yeah.
And honestly, I felt like, gosh, I somewhat felt kind of less than, you know what I'm saying? Somewhat felt kind of like, I'm not on this level. How do I get here though?
Yeah.
Can I speak to that for a minute? Because
Go
we just experienced that in our group the other day, and I think that is when we talked prior to this about what are the reasons that keep people out. I think that's what happens. People look at things with the glass being half empty, and I'm not mature enough spiritually, or I'm not plugged into the church, my job, or they have all these reasons. And like we talked about with the two guys who shared this past Wednesday, and we've seen it almost every Wednesday at Rudy's when we meet, some guys like, well, my story's either not that great, or I don't know enough, or I'm not really connected. And every time people are messaging afterwards like, oh, so-and-so, I love when you shared your story, and it was so great, it hit me this way. And then every guy after they share was like, oh, I guess my story did mean something. I guess I am. I mean, I told our group, we had the one guy that was not going to come after the first meeting because he said, I'll never measure up to these guys. I'm like, man, you totally need to be in this group. And he's been very faithful since, other than one out-of-town trip. So, Satan's going to ding us up and give us all these reasons why anybody shouldn't be involved, no matter whether you're a city manager, a pastor, nonprofit guy, business, whatever it is. Yep. Everybody's questioning themselves.
Well, so Pat Williams says here, he says, how would a man seeking a locker room get connected? Very good question, Pat. Jeff, what would you say to that?
Well, when we have 22 or 23, it's a matter of every day there's something going on somewhere between Panera, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A in the Dayton area, Penny Lane out in New Carlisle, Spotted Cow in Urbana. They're all over. So typically, I would say the vast majority of the time someone reaches out to me or someone invites somebody. Our North Dayton group the other day, a pastor up in Sydney, Tip City area, met me through a couple of mutual contacts. He wanted to come. He brought a guy. So, we don't, unfortunately, some of my board members disagree with us, but we don't put it all out there just for everybody to see whenever, because what would be a little crazy is if like 10 random people showed up on a given week. We try to keep them within a 6 to 12 people kind of range for the most part. But
I would suggest a good first step is sitting down with you. Would be sitting down with Jeff.
Typically me or the right leader, the right board member, or whatever. Jeremy's been, I think in 1 week I saw him meet with like 4 guys from the group individually or something like that. Nice. So these guys we've seen it in our group. There's a number of these guys. Brian Yaller, I think, has met with probably 3 or 4 guys. Guys just randomly start meeting with each other, and then somebody talks about it from there, and that's when it kind of gets a 3D level. But really.
And I would encourage too, if somebody out there knows somebody or has heard somebody mention anything about the gathering itself, but this locker room concept and experience, reach out and talk to that person. Yeah. Just have a conversation. Yeah. I encourage and challenge them to find out more. Yeah. Because I think it's important what you said, Jeff. What's unique about all the locker room groups are we're all at different stages of life. Yeah. We're all at different stages in our faith, and that's okay. Right. Christ encountered the highest priest, and he encountered the leper outside of the leper town. And the poorest of poor, and he connected and was able to connect on a level with them because it's about your faith.
Well, and that low bar guy, or the guy who's maybe young in his faith, or maybe the one guy was saying not quite there, maybe. That's the guy that really motivates and inspires the rest of the group. Yeah. They think it's the high level guy. It's actually the low bar guy. Jeremy could probably speak to that some with his group and just experience a lot of different ways.
It's been kind of cool. We've had some turnover in our group. I think there's 3 of us that are still there from the original time. People have moved out, moved on, whatever. Our group is huge. At this point, I think that Starbucks is going to ask us to pay rent because we take up so much of their cafe space. But
I think Jeff's maybe on staff.
Got a contract.
He's on some kind of contract at some point for sure. But I invited a guy that I'm kind of doing life with through church, and he had kind of asked me, hey, do you know how does the guy get involved in the locker room? Kind of like Pat's question. And I said, well, I'm leading one, and I took a little bit of a leader executive privilege and said, just come on out next Wednesday. he brought somebody with him.
That's what's up.
And, some of this is just relationally motivated. Yep. And I would encourage most, Springfield's a big, small town. Chances are, if you're not involved in a locker room, you know somebody who is. Yep. And just sitting down with them and saying, what's up? What's going on? I loved we've kind of, many groups have kind of going through a season of sharing their story. We just wrapped up with ours. We went around, it took about 2.5 months or something like that, a while of everybody sharing like kind of how I got here from wherever there was to where I'm at now. And we had some of those moments where people were like, my story is not like theirs. And not only was sometimes it validating, but for them to be able to share their story, sometimes I saw people in our group speak to something that was going on. So somebody was kind of hesitant to share their story because they saw a point of their story as I don't say a weakness, but they haven't got it all figured out yet. And they were kind of, I don't know if I want to throw this on the table because it doesn't have a happy ending yet. And some of the life that was spoken, I remember one time somebody just kind of stopped our group while somebody was sharing and said, hold on, can I speak to what you just said? Man, that's not you. And what you're doing is changing that. And I just want to encourage you.
That's what's
and
up.
You could see life being spoken back into them. And I'm like, this is why we don't want to go through this by ourselves.
Yep.
Well, and the beauty of that too is, Eric, we experienced this in our group the other day with a guy. I think too often we've tried to make within the Big C body of Christ church, we're trying to look for these perfect, well-crafted, finished stories. There's no finished stories.
Doesn't exist.
None of us.
No.
Scary to think if this is finished right here, but for any of us, they're not finished. And I think when guys get beat up feeling like, they beat themselves up feeling like I'm supposed to be some finished product, you're not. And Scripture is clear. It's either going to be when Jesus returns or when we die. So, the beauty is that these stories are all, comma, ... still being written. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So what kind of sold me on the locker room experience is the fact that, and I know we all go through different phases in life, and myself personally, we all want to grow professionally, we all want to grow in our family, we all want to grow in business if that's our choice, But what I've learned, and this is my own experience, is that no matter how quote unquote successful I become, right, there's still an emptiness that's inside of me, right, and that emptiness is only filled when I'm amongst men who are trying to pursue, right? Trying to become better, trying to study, trying to learn, trying to be a part of, So a few weeks ago, big life change. I'm trying to do it. And I'm like, this just, something doesn't feel right. But it's like just sitting down at the table with the guys, and I'm like, and you feel that relief.
Yeah.
You don't even have to say anything. No one has to tell me anything. It's the feeling, right? It's the presence. And I'm like, this is where it's at right here.
Well,
Yeah.
doesn't
Puts
it say a lot about the male to male relationship?
It really does.
That when we can look into each other's heart and say, man, I accept you for who you are, whether you're killing it right now with what you're doing or whether you're taking a big risk and you're sitting here wondering if you're going to fall flat on your face, just know that if you do, I'll fall with you.
Yep.
I'm right there.
Well, we had the guy the other day who shared big time stuff in a story, and one of the guys stopped like 5 minutes into his story and just said, can any of us believe that about that guy, what he's sharing? And then 25 minutes later, whatever it was when he was done, we asked a question like, okay, who respects this guy more now?
10
after
times
sharing?
more.
Everybody raised their hand.
Yeah.
Like, we totally respect you more for sharing the difficult things you just shared.
Yeah. Like the Insta filter comes off, right? Like
Real fast.
it's not about putting that best life forward. It's about being real.
Yeah,
And then realizing, man, when I'm real, he actually responds to me better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I think from that story, the thing I'll remember, Eric, and you probably remember this, the guy, somebody asked that particular guy, like, how have you dealt with shame? And he said, the more I talk about it and I'm honest and vulnerable in a situation like this shame kind of gets dealt with and processed. He goes, when I don't talk about it, that's when I struggle with shame. And I thought that was a profound statement made the other day that we got to hear that I'm like, wow.
The cool thing is and we all know this, we're all struggling with something, right? We all have some sort of guilt, shame, remorse for things, but it's like, just like you said, when we can peel the mask off, be vulnerable, be honest, and build true relationships, that's what we're talking about here today, and that's what's found in the locker rooms. And I haven't found too many places where you can find that. Even in family, you can't always find that. right?
Yeah.
In your jobs and your sports, like you just can't always find that. But the locker rooms have been a way for me to build a better connection with men. And I like the walk with God. I'm still a baby. I'm still the beginner level. I'm still trying to get plugged in and stay connected. But I know just grabbing on your guys' shirt tails and holding on, I'm gonna get there.
You know, Eric, I'm reminded of our friends at Zoe, Michael Thompson, Greg Sailors, those guys in North Carolina. They have the book The Heart of a Warrior, and they have that tagline about having nothing to fear, nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to lose. And that's that kind of mantra, I think, is what we're really trying to get guys to understand. And through that, not only do it in community, but doing it in community will allow us to buy into it ourselves and live that kind of life.
Yeah.
Which we all desperately want.
Guys, we got a bunch of comments here. Chris says, everyone knows Mr. Pinkleton. And if there's somebody out there and you are watching this and you don't know Jeff Pinkleton, send him a message.
Hold on. If you don't know Jeff Pinkleton, what corner of the globe are you living on?
Or just like this video, because if you like this video, I bet he'll shoot you a message. He will definitely plug in with you.
And I'll tag it like crazy. I'll have to tag later Leadership Clark.
William says, what's your story? We appreciate you, Pat. You're a big champion.
We never hear Pat say that.
Jason Hill, Jeff's loves our locker room.
So Pat, good word. They can find us on gatheringmiamivalley.org, Jeff at gatheringmiamivalley.com, and then our Facebook page is facebook.com/gatheringmiamivalley.
Yep. Pat Williams, he's always
Is he like our editor? What's going on? He should be in here.
Yeah, he will be next time. He'll have us in.
You know, I say Pat might be a good next guest too.
There you go.
Absolutely.
So, how long would that one go?
All day.
I have to give a shout out here. I just saw my friend Sam Gilbert got on. Sam is a longtime friend, goes back to Cedarville, and is actually tuning in from Hendersonville, Tennessee right now. Sam's one of those guys that kind of walked me through with that. Roommates, traveled together. Man, we have gone to the mat with each other in crisis and things like that. And those are the guys that when it hits the fan, like you can pick up a phone and say, like the 2 a.m. friend, like this, 2 a.m. friends. In fact, we had 2 a.m. phone calls, and there's something that is reassuring. Like right now, I'm not walking through a crisis. God willing, I'm staying out of some that kind of stuff. But I know that if something happens, like there's a quick dial of lots of people.
Yep.
And there's something to be said about the confidence you get from that too.
Absolutely. And then just kind of some final thoughts here. That's the essence of the gathering.
Absolutely.
Connecting men to men and men to God. And guys, the whole purpose of us shooting these videos is we are trying to reach men. Right? We're trying to reach men. We're trying to reach women. So if you're seeing this, right, and you know somebody that you would like to have an experience with a locker room, somebody you would like to experience sitting down with Jeff or Jeremy or Brian to get plugged in, to get connected, please share this video with them and let them know how important the gathering is to you.
Yeah.
Share this message, comment below. Tell us about your experience with the locker room. Tell us what has went well for you, what has went not so well, right? Yeah. Where have you struggled? Where have you succeeded? Where have you found connection? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, and that's what we're doing here.
We don't shy away from that. I mean, Brian has shared his story a number of times about that first experience where it got a little sideways. And, when you have 180 some guys involved, I mean, that's going to happen. I think the other part of it is, too, I appreciate what you said about women, because we have more and more conversations all the time. Many people who watch this, I guess, will know who Louis Ortega is, who's been involved recently. And I always say I hate when people use the excuse they're busy, because they're not. But I always say Louis and probably Jeremy could actually say that. But, Louis has been cranking out, getting ready with his food truck, the new restaurant over at the Cohatch, yada, yada, yada. So Sunday, I'm leaving Spring Hill after Jeremy got done preaching, and I'm walking out, and Amanda walks out about the same time, his wife, and I just said, hey, Amanda, I really appreciate you allowing Louis to be as tied in as he is and kind of loaning him out to us, so to speak. And he had recently served at our worship night, involved in a group and whatever. And she said, you know what? He's just better off when that's happening. He's been meeting with, every day he's telling me somebody he's been meeting with one-on-one that's been involved in the gathering. And she goes, and then I feel good about going out with my female friends like she did the other night. And then she said, he's better off, we're better off. So when we talk about what we're doing for men, I think the ultimate in that is doing something for women too. And Amanda was just such a huge encouragement to me the other day as we were talking about Louis and his involvement. Jeremy gets to spend a lot of time with him as well. And it's neat to see that kind of dynamic. I hope, Brittany and Bailey are two of our big fans too. So
Good deal.
Well, and if I can, pick up on what you said, my experience, if I can encourage those, maybe you were somebody that had that not so great experience right off the bat, or just, maybe the one time you went wasn't what you thought.
Yeah.
Let me be a testimony to give it another
That's
go,
good.
give it
Absolutely.
another
That's good.
try,
Yeah.
because
Usually doesn't take off the first time around.
yeah, sometimes maybe
Let's not
it
say
just wasn't the
usually.
right group. Maybe it's the mix of people.
Yeah.
But just I'd encourage people to try it again if they had a bad experience and haven't really given it another shot. Give it another chance. Give
It is a little
another shot.
ironic. Brian's first time in, he was in a group with me, and now he's not. So I don't know what that says, but
I said it
think
might
it
have been the
says
mix of
everything
people.
you needed to
so-
say right there.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, definitely leave them below. We know Jeff will be all in the comment section trying to plug and connect with anybody he can. Shoot us a message if you have any good ideas as for topics that would relate to connecting men and connecting men to God. So thanks for watching, folks. Hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you on the next one.
thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.